Episode 6, Pt2 House. London, 1917. George V, Queen Mary of Teck, and son David, who would later become King Edward VIII, or Edward the Duke of Windsor, are having breakfast when they receive a letter from Downing Street. The Prime Minister and the government are willing to ship the Romanov family to the UK for their protection from the Bolshevik Revolution happening in Russia, and are awaiting the King's approval. So, let's explain the Russian Revolution in a microsecond. The Russian Revolution took place in February 1917 when the populace of Russia revolted against the government of Tsar Nicholas II. The Tsar and his family were forced to abdicate and flee the city for their own safety. The revolution was led by Vladimir Lenin and a group of communist revolutionaries called the Bolsheviks. The new government that was put in place then turned the country of Russia into the Soviet Union, the first communist country in the world. After the revolution, Russia exited World War I by signing a peace treaty with Germany called the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. The Romanov family, living under house arrest, guarded by Bolshevik soldiers, hoped that Nicholas's third cousin, King George V of England, would come to their rescue. But he was to be disappointed. As seen in this episode, on July the 17th, 1918, the Tsar and his family were lined up against the wall in the cellar of a Pt2 house, Ekaterinburg, and shot dead by firing squad. The four daughters did try to run to safety as soon as the first shots rang out, the bullets having bounced off of the diamonds inside their corsets, but were caught and bayoneted to death, huddled together in a corner. The 7 family members and 4 servants' bodies were loaded into the back of a Fiat truck and driven 9 miles to the Kopchiaki forest, where they were buried in shallow graves. The Romanovs' death scene in The Crown does largely tally with known history. Even lines of dialogue, such as Tsarina Alexandra asking for a chair and little Anastasia being lifted and pressed against the wall before being stabbed, are reported to have taken place in reality. One grisly detail that was left out is that when the bodies were removed to be transported, Maria and Anastasia were still alive. Despite receiving multiple stab wounds with bayonets, they groaned whilst being lifted and were subsequently shot in the head. Back to the present day, and Elizabeth the Queen is watching the news. A Soviet coup in Moscow is attempting to restore communism through revolution. Protesters line the streets against the forces that have now declared themselves in charge. The masses rally around Boris Yeltsin, the first formally elected president of the Russian Federation. The coup appears to be failing, and Yeltsin pledges that democracy will prevail and there will be no return of the Cold War. John Major, the first Western leader to visit Moscow since the coup, tells Liz he admired Yeltsin's refusal to compromise with the hardliners, and though he drinks and swears too much, the man is straightforward and likeable. Yeltsin did like a drink. That is true. On an infamous trip to the US in September 1994 to meet President Bill Clinton, Yeltsin got so drunk he wandered into the street in his underwear trying to get a pizza. Relatable when drunk. Not the underwear bit, but pizza. I don't not get it. Liz prepares to meet Yeltsin and sign the first Anglo-Russian friendship treaty since 1766. Fellows does a little digging into Yeltsin and discovers that he used to be a regional official in the Urals and was first secretary of the party committee in Sverdlovsk Oblast, formerly Yekaterinburg, where a Patiev house was located. But he wasn't actually promoted to the position of first secretary until 1976. Over dinner, Liz tells Yeltsin she knows his history and that he personally gave the order for Ipatiev house to be demolished, and she felt that it was a great disrespect to her family's memory and that the Romanovs deserve a proper burial. There's no evidence that I can find that Yeltsin was responsible for issuing the order for the destruction of Ipatiev house. Let me know if you can find otherwise. In the 1970s, Yuri Andropov ordered the House of Special Purpose, as it had been renamed whilst the Romanovs were under house arrest there, to be bulldozed. Yeltsin gives his word to Liz that he will do everything he can to restore their dignity, but in Russian, however, he says to his team that Liz has no right to lecture him like that. The Romanov deaths were sealed in Buckingham Palace, not the Kremlin, and if she's not careful, she'll end up with a bayonet up her arse too. Charming. Historian Sarah Gristwood calls this utterance pretty damned unlikely. When back in Russia, Yeltsin orders the excavation of the site of Ipatiev house, and the bones are promptly found. They were actually found 9 miles away from Ipatiev house by amateur sleuths in 1979, excavated in 1991, and identified in 1993. All 3 events are depicted to have happened in 1994 in the series after Boris Yeltsin's visit to London. It's clear from the bones found that a horrific slaughter took place, supporting historical accounts. There were skulls smashed in with rifle butts and bullets embedded in temples. After the slaughter, the Bolsheviks doused their bodies with acid, burned their clothes, and buried them in a mass grave. The authorities are confident the remains of the Romanovs, but because of the acid damage, they need to confirm via DNA testing. And Philip is asked to provide a sample for comparison. The only place in the world that can carry out bone DNA sequencing is in the UK, at Aldermaston. They require maternal/mitochondrial DNA, and as Philip's grandmother, Princess Victoria of Hesse, was Alexandra's older sister, Tsarina Alexandra's older sister, he can be tested to authenticate the remains. Whilst Liz seems rather disinterested, Penny Natchbull listens to Philip in amazement at the process Philip's blood sample went through to extract the DNA. It comes back as a 98.5% certainty match, meaning the Romanovs can now be buried with dignity. Philip reads tons of books on Russia and its history to learn and discover more about his ancestors in preparation for a royal trip to Moscow, and takes a special interest in the Russian Orthodox Church. Liz gives a speech there in Moscow as the first ever British monarch to ever set foot in Moscow, to the first democratically elected leader Russia had ever had. This visit took place in 1994. According to The Guardian, the visit to Moscow put an end to more than 7 decades of estrangement between the Kremlin and Europe's royalty. Yeltsin was suitably aware of the magnitude of the moment, planning a lavish trip that featured a trip to the Bolshoi Ballet. And the Queen also discussed the visit in her Christmas speech that year, proclaiming, "I never thought it would be possible in my lifetime to join with the Patriarch of Moscow and his congregation in a service in that wonderful cathedral in the heart of the Moscow Kremlin." After the speech, Fellows informs Liz that there's a problem. A last-minute hold-up of the funeral, as they are still unable to identify 2 of the bodies. Liz is devastated. They've come all that way and the funeral is unable to take place. Tsar Nicholas's remains were only confirmed to have been identified in 1998. The reburial took place that year, with Yeltsin describing the killings as one of the most shameful pages in Russian history. There's no suggestion that Queen Elizabeth's visit to Moscow was ever intended to coincide with any kind of burial ceremony. Liz and Philip have a conversation that we can't possibly know the truth of, nor if it even happened. He wonders if after 47 years of marriage, if there's anything about them that they have in common and how greatly their interests and passions vary. He tells Liz that although the Bolsheviks pulled the trigger, her grandparents are the ones with blood on their hands. He admits he has sought intellectual and spiritual companionship with his carriage-driving friends, particularly Penny. Adamant that they are only friends, he asks Liz to spend time with Penny too. Whether the two meeting was instigated by Philip or not, Liz and Penny Natchbull were friends and did remain close friends, pictured together after the death of Philip, not that long ago. Liz, in the show, and invites Penny to Windsor, where they meet in the stables. Liz refuses to believe that George V would ever let his cousin Nicky down in that way. Penny asks to check out Edward VIII's diary, which would have been kept in the royal collection at Windsor after being rescued from Villa Windsor, where she finds an account of that breakfast in 1917 where he details Queen Mary's refusal to the request. Penny explains that there was a rivalry between Mary and Alexandra stemming from childhood. Liz says that's nonsense and the decision was made with much anguish to protect the crown from a popular revolt and a people who disliked Alexandra, a German woman at a time when Germany and England were at war. Earlier that same year in 1917, the British royal family had actually in fact changed their name from the German Saxe-Coburg Gotha to the English Windsor, due to anti-German sentiment caused by World War I. Liz says Queen Mary of Teck was devastated when she learned of the fate that befell the Romanovs. Liz asks Penny to accompany her in the car to the Christmas church service at Sandringham, where Philip is delighted to see the two women together. John Major meets with Liz and confirms that the Russian scientists have now confirmed the final set of remains as Tsar Nicholas. As I said, he was the last to be identified, but that was in 1998. Which means the official burial of the Imperial Royal Family can now take place. Yeltsin, in a happy call to Major, said he hoped a line could be drawn under the matter once and for all and that friendship and cooperation between the two countries could resume. In a ceremony in 1998 attended by Boris Yeltsin and 50 or so Romanov relatives, the remains were reburied in the family crypt at St. Petersburg. John Major congratulates Liz on her upcoming wedding anniversary and that he and Norma are heading towards their 24th year of marriage. Liz asks what he thinks they're doing right to make their marriages last so long when so many fail. And Major quotes Dostoevsky's wife Anna as saying she and Fyodor were contrasting characters with different temperaments and entirely opposing views, yet they never tried to change one another nor interfere with the other's soul. He surmises in jest that the key to a happy marriage, it would seem, is having absolutely nothing in common. Philip walks into the bedroom, spies Liz playing with the corgis, and it makes him smile. Episode 7, No Woman's Land. Prince William is off to school at Eton. Diana describes being separated as a strange no man's land or no woman's land, neither married nor single. The paparazzi are out in force to capture William's first day at school. Charles scolds Diana for smothering William in public as he's signing the enrolment book. When saying goodbye, Diana says that if William ever feels lonely, he can only look out the window and give Granny a wave, as Eton School is only a mile from Windsor. William did attend Eton School in 1995 when he was 11, so I would have been 6 and at primary school. Liz asks fellows to arrange for William to pop round for tea occasionally, which Prince William did. Apparently, the two had a very close relationship, which is cute. Diana's brother Charles, Earl Spencer, becomes the latest high-profile figure to fall victim to having his private correspondence leaked for money. Earl Spencer's own head of security, Alan Walker, allegedly gave a letter to Today newspaper in which the Earl is critical of his sister's behaviour. Martin Bashir floats the idea to the editor of Panorama about getting an interview with Diana. Bashir is a famous interviewer. Panorama is a deep dive, sort of hard-hitting TV program here in the UK that looks at things like crime, poverty, corruption, bad stuff. It tries to be sort of cutting-edge undercover journalism. Bashir pays Charles Spencer a visit, which he did. He did make the trip up to Althorpe, Northamptonshire on the 31st of August 1995, where he presents fake bank statements showing payments made to Alan Walker by News International, who were the owners of Today newspaper, and from an offshore account in Jersey, a firm called Penfield Consultants for services undefined. Bashir tells Spencer he thinks this Jersey firm are a front for the security services MI5 and GCHQ, which is the government communication headquarters, which is the equivalent of our sort of CIA, MI5, MI6. It's like the equivalent of our FBI, our CIA. It's, top intelligence agencies. And that these organisations may have been the main instigators behind the leaks of private conversations. Bashir says that if they're bugging Spencer, they're bound to be doing it to Diana too. He then shows another fake document, which is showing details of an account registered in the Channel Islands, showing payments going to Patrick Jeffson, Diana's private secretary. He says he worries that Jeffson and other members of Diana's private staff are in fact spies for the security services, possibly at the behest of the Duchy of Cornwall, which is Charles's duchy. After this meeting, Spencer calls Panorama editor James Hewlett to ask if he could vouch for Bashir, and Hewlett says he's one of their best, an award-winning journalist whose word can absolutely be trusted. And that was believed for quite some time, but as we will learn, a bit fishy. We know now that those documents were forged by Bashir. The Mail on Sunday reported in April 1996 on the existence of 2 forged bank statements which Bashir commissioned from graphic designer Matthew Weissler, and which purported to show payments of thousands of pounds to Earl Spencer's former head of security from News International. The suggestion was that Bashir had used these documents to gain the trust of Earl Spencer and thereby Diana in order to land this exclusive interview. The BBC said at the time, "We have confirmed that in no way were the documents used to gain the interview with Princess Diana." However, an independent inquiry carried out in 2020 found that the BBC fell below its high standards of integrity and transparency, and that Bashir acted in a deceitful way and faked documents to obtain his interview. Of the whole affair, Bashir said, "I never wanted to harm Diana in any way, and I don't believe we did. Everything we did in terms of the interview was as she wanted. From when she wanted to alert the palace to when it was broadcast to its contents, my family and I loved her." The BBC and Bashir have since apologised, and the BBC wrote to Princes William and Harry. BBC Director General Tim Davies said the organisation apologised to Tiggy, Prince Charles, Prince William and Prince Harry for the way in which Princess Diana was deceived and the subsequent impact on all their lives. Now we know about the shocking way that the interview was obtained. I've decided that the BBC will never show the programme again, nor will we licence it in whole or part to any other broadcasters. In July 2022, the BBC paid the young prince's former nanny, Tiggy Legg Bork, a substantial sum of money after an official BBC inquiry found that in an effort to land his interview with Princess Diana, Bashir manipulated the late royal into believing that Tiggy had been having an affair with Charles, resulting in a pregnancy that was terminated. and produced fake bank statements as proof. I do wonder how many more skeletons will be found in the metaphorical closet of this event. Like, this is just awful. Back to the show. Diana accompanies one of her friends to hospital to provide moral support as her husband is undergoing surgery, where Diana meets Dr. Hasnat Khan. According to Sarah Bradford's book, Diana, the Princess of Wales, met Hasnat while visiting the sick husband of her therapist and counsellor Una Shanley Toffolo at the Royal Brompton Hospital in West London. That is a really posh name, isn't it? Una Shanley Toffolo. It's even got toff in there, which is a British word for a rich person. A posh person is referred to as a toff. Over here. So Sarah Bradford says Hasnat had assisted on the surgery of Una's husband, and he came into the room and was introduced to Diana. Apparently he barely noticed the princess, but she was immediately struck by him and said to her friend, "Isn't he drop dead gorgeous?" Diana and William catch up over the phone, and Diana hears a distinctive click as though someone is listening in. Jeffson asks if she is perhaps imagining it and explains that every call, whether incoming or outgoing, has to go through the palace switchboard, making tapping calls extremely difficult. Diana heads out in the car, where she has a very scary experience where her car's brakes fail. Luckily, she is unharmed and miraculously avoids any collisions, but is very shaken. According to Dr. Hasnat Khan, this did happen. Diana did switch cars after experiencing faulty brakes. In his statement at the 2008 inquest into her death, Dr. Khan said, "One day in 1995, I had finished work and bumped into Diana outside the hospital. She'd been visiting Mr. Toffolo and was in her black Audi. I next saw her in a car just a couple of months later. It was a different one to the Audi. I think it was a BMW. I asked her what had happened to the Audi, as it was such a lovely car. She told me that the brakes had been tampered with, so she decided to change her car." Diana's friend Simone Simmons also backs this up and described the incident, which happened in November 1995 when Diana was returning to Kensington Palace after a doctor's appointment in Marylebone. Simmons claims she rang me and said, "Someone's tampered with my brakes. They're trying to bump me off." She was panic-stricken and very upset. As she approached some traffic lights, she put her foot on the brake, but nothing happened and the car kept coasting forward. When eventually it came to a halt, she leapt out, abandoned it and went straight back to Kensington Palace in a taxi. Foreshadowing. After 2 years of not speaking, Diana meets up with her brother Charles, who she calls Carlos, where he tells her all about his meeting with Martin Bashir. Liz and William have afternoon tea together. Liz asks if he's worried about his mum, and William says he just wants her to be happy. Diana does the rounds at Royal Brompton Hospital, talking to and holding hands with patients of all ages. Everyone gets the same personalised, dedicated time from her, and she was like that. Dr. Khan watches her as a nurse explains she's been coming in every day to talk to the patients with no press and no bodyguards. Dr. Khan thanks Diana for what she's doing to lift people's spirits. They meet up for lunch at midnight at the vending machine, and Diana invites him to see Apollo 13 in the cinema that coming Friday. Diana and Bashir meet along with Earl Spencer. Bashir tells Diana that her driver Steve Davis is now also in on the whole spying operation. He says that a year ago, a decision was made by the establishment to mount an all-out attack on Diana, to discredit her, tear her down, and ultimately force her to leave the country to live a quiet life abroad. Panorama will help her get ahead of their plan by giving her the chance to tell her side of the story. Spencer seems unsure and says they should think about it. And Diana says, well, Oprah and Barbara Walters and David Frost are already very interested in giving her side of the story airtime. But Bashir offers Diana complete control over the interview and reassures her that she'd be protected by the best brand name in the world for journalistic integrity, the BBC. No comment. He gives Diana his home phone number in case they want to discuss things further. When telling Hewlett about meeting, Bashir says Diana is desperate to talk, that she opens her mouth and hand grenades come out. She wants to tear down the temple. Khan waits in the cinema lobby but fails to recognise Diana in a dark brown wig and sunglasses, and she takes him by surprise. They have drinks afterwards and talk. Khan excuses himself when talk turns flirty, and when questioned as to why he's leaving without giving Diana a proper kiss, he says he doesn't understand what she sees in him. A totally average, socially inept, slightly overweight workaholic doctor. She replies that she's not some glamorous celestial thing to be scared of, and that she already had a prince, and he broke her heart, so maybe she should try dating a frog instead. And that results in them kissing. I'm not sure I would want to kiss someone that called me a frog, but I appreciate the sentiment, I suppose. Like this episode shows, Diana made nightly visits to the hospital, and they also had several public dates where Diana wore a disguise. In her book, Diana, Her Last Love, about the princess's relationship with Dr. Hasnat Khan, author Kate Snell claims the royal would wear wigs, adjust her makeup and wear different styles of clothing to go on dates with the heart surgeon. She also once dressed up as an eccentrically dressed gay male model so that she could enjoy a night out clubbing with Freddie Mercury, which is one of my favourite stories about Princess Diana, and I really hope it makes it into season 6 so that we can talk about that. Bashir meets Diana in a car park at night. He tells her that 3 phone lines at the palace have been tapped, and Diana has been followed 3 times this week by members of the security services posing as paparazzi. More fake bank statements are produced to show that Jefferson has received payments to betray Diana sent to a Channel Islands account shared with Charles's private secretary, Richard Aylard. As a man of colour from a council estate, Bashir assures Diana he knows how it feels to be an insider within one of Britain's most cherished institutions. Diana is thankful to be understood and to finally have someone on her side she can trust. And Bashir promises to protect her every step of the way. Episode 8, Gunpowder. We're at the BBC Broadcasting House, and the Royal Charter has been renewed for 10 years to inform, to educate and to entertain. Their nickname, Auntie Beeb, is not liked by the Director General, who sees it as not modern or progressive. They are still referred to as Auntie Beeb by some people. At Buckingham Palace, William tries to get Liz to get satellite TV installed. She doesn't want to be disloyal and betray the BBC, but she is very tempted when William says she can watch specialist horse racing channels. Diana has agreed to give Panorama free rein on the final cut and interview questions. Her only stipulation is that it's conducted at Buckingham Palace and that she's allowed to speak to the Queen before it airs. Recording is scheduled for Sunday, November the 5th. The irony of that date is lost on absolutely no one, I am sure. The British Broadcasting Corporation, or the BBC, was founded in 1922. It is a publicly funded set of TV, radio and internet channels paid for by the public via a TV licence, which is practically mandatory for most people in the UK to buy. Some of us managed to get around it, but yeah, we have to pay to watch TV. Free healthcare, we have to pay to watch TV. As a public service broadcaster, it is incorporated under a royal charter. The BBC is required by this charter to remain free from political or commercial influences and to answer only to its viewers and the audience. And for that reason, the BBC has never run any kind of adverts, which set it apart from other available channels at this time who were entirely funded by advertisers. Now, what is so significant about the date November 5th in the UK is that we call it Bonfire Night. People all over the country set off fireworks in remembrance of the anniversary of the Gunpowder Plot of 1605, when a group of dissident Catholics tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament. It's a commonly told joke in the UK that Guy Fawkes, the man who was caught surrounded by gunpowder in the cellar of the Houses of Parliament that night, was the last person to enter the Houses of Parliament with honest intention. Liz lunches with pals, and one of those pals is one of the Queen's ladies-in-waiting, Lazy Susan Hussey, wife of Marmaduke Duke Hussey, chairman of the BBC. And I am trying not to be a child and laugh, because in the UK, Hussey is a term for a promiscuous female. So the chairman of the BBC and his wife both being Hussies. Silly. Childish. Apologies. Susan suggests to her husband that the BBC do something to commemorate Liz's upcoming 70th birthday, to cheer her up and to remind the nation how lucky they are to have her as Queen. Bashir and Hewlett meet with John Burt to get the okay on filming. Both Burt and Hussey need to run their respective ideas past each other, so they meet for lunch, after which Burt calls Hewlett and gives him the go-ahead. Charles Spencer starts looking over his notes, and he sees some things that Bashir told him that don't quite add up. Diana questions Bashir on this, and he says Spencer's lack of trust and sudden change of heart is irrational, and that the security services must have gotten to him too. As William learns all about the gunpowder plot at Eton, the team set up at Kensington Palace for the infamous panorama interview. Bashir and the team pose as hi-fi equipment installers to get past security. Bashir interviews Diana, while the rest of the family enjoy a bonfire night together at Highgrove, along with Camilla. The cloak and dagger operation to get Bashir and crew into Kensington Palace was real. The 2021 independent inquiry revealed how they disguised themselves as tradesmen to gain access to Diana's apartments. So Bert heads to Eastbourne to meet with Bashir and Hewlett, who is staying at the hotel under the name Robert Catesby, who was the ringleader of the 1605 gunpowder plot, which I thought was a nice touch. And they watch the interview. He worries it could be the end of their careers by giving an unstable woman with an axe to grind a global platform, yet reluctantly agrees to it being broadcast. Satellite TV is installed in all the royal palaces, but Liz wants absolute reassurance that all of the satellite discs will be hidden from public view on the outside of the building. The Queen Mother explains to William that in 1936, the year Elizabeth became heir to the throne, the first BBC programme was broadcast from Alexandra Palace. Not many people had TVs then, but all that changed with Liz's coronation. The first ever televised coronation, people bought TV sets in their millions to watch it. There was just one channel back then, the BBC, and God Save the Queen played at the end of the day's shows. Next came BBC2, which was just additional content from the BBC. And then commercial TV became a thing, with ITV being added as the third channel, and then Channel 4 was added. I personally remember as a child the excitement around Channel 5 being launched, and that we were going to get a fifth channel, which meant there were 5 different channels to choose what we wanted to watch from on a daily basis. Now there's hundreds of channels with programmes available around the clock with the introduction of satellite TV. I also remember my dad getting Sky in the early 2000s, and all the kids in my street coming round to mine to watch the music channels as well. So yeah, The difference between the BBC and ITV Channel 4, Channel 5, and indeed most of the satellite channels is that they are all funded by advertising, whereas the BBC contains no adverts and it is publicly funded by the TV licence. So it has a duty of care and a responsibility to be impartial and educational and all that kind of stuff, because the public are paying for it. Diana goes over to see Liz in the evening for a private chat to tell her about the interview. The show is due to air on November the 20th, and Diana says she felt the need to clear up a few things about the marriage and the unkindness and the lack of empathy she received from the family. Liz can't understand why it all has to be done so publicly, and doesn't see how this interview will be any different from the newspaper articles, magazines and the tell-all book that have come before. Diana says she often wanted to talk to Liz alone to address the issues, but was always refused an audience or fobbed off, to which Liz replies that she's a busy woman and has always defended Diana to the hilt whenever her antics or unhappiness are raised, and she still wants her to be the next queen. In fact, none of this conversation happened at all. None of it. Not a single bit. According to Patrick Jeffson, I know the scene. I know it was made up because I was there, and I can tell you that the princess absolutely failed to summon up the necessary courage and delegated the job to me. So I used the car telephone to call the Queen's private secretary and break the sensational news. In a comedy of confusion, the only person in the Queen's office at the time was Her Majesty's press secretary, who thus got the vital information seconds before he received it firsthand from the BBC anyway. Bert tells Hussey a TV show about the monarchy will air and will be announced on November 14th, which was Charles's birthday. Bert says it's the Queen's Golden Jubilee in 7 years' time, and they'll make lots of programmes celebrating her reign for that. But this upcoming programme is not about Liz. Hussey is furious and says the show will see them on the wrong side of history. Whether this meeting took place and whether Hussey said that or not, we don't know. But it wasn't wrong. The panorama thing and the shadiness with Bashir did put them on the wrong side of history in the end. On the 20th of November, the interview airs as Liz is attending the 67th variety show performance to support the Entertainment Artists Benevolent Fund, and she's also celebrating her 48th wedding anniversary. Bashir asks Diana if she really thinks the royal family are out to get her, and she says that since separating from Charles, she's been seen as problem number one. She admits that she had postnatal depression after William was born, and when asked about Camilla, she utters the line, "Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a little crowded." She says the royals have given up on her because she wants to do things differently and connect with people emotionally, and that she won't go quietly. When asked if Charles will be a good king, she says he may not be able to handle the pressure that it would bring. And on her being future queen, she says she wants to be a queen of people's hearts, but can't see herself as being queen of the country, as those at the top have decided that she's an issue. The interview is plastered all over the papers the next day. So, during the actual interview that did air on the 20th of November 1995, Diana spoke about Charles and Camilla, uttering the famous phrase, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." I will, you can find the interview online pretty easily, but I will try and link it below so you can go and watch it for yourself. She also talked frankly about her difficulties with postnatal depression and bulimia, and admitted to having had an affair with her riding instructor, James Hewitt, who so many people in the UK think is Prince Harry's dad, which the maths aren't mathing. Like, she didn't meet James Hewitt till like 2 years after Harry was born. But yeah, James Hewitt's ginger, so he's a redhead, so let's press on. The most controversial element for the royals was Diana's response to the question of whether Charles would be a good king, to which she replied, being Prince of Wales produces more freedom now, and being king would be a little bit more suffocating. And because I know the character, I would think that the top job, as I call it, would bring enormous limitations to him, and I don't know whether he could adapt to that. The explosive interview was watched by nearly 23 million people in the UK, and as the montage towards the end of the episode shows, made headlines around the world. The interview was a genuine bombshell moment, Dr. Ed Owens told History Extra. There was a great sense of public support for Diana following the interview, with more than 80% of respondents to a special phone-in poll reporting that they took Diana's side in the war. Historian Sarah Gristwood said, "Certainly I think what is true is that there was a very strong reaction against the Panorama interview and effectively against Diana afterwards, within the royal family this is. There was a sense that a line had been crossed. I believe that view came strongly from Princess Margaret and Prince Philip. The Queen, as ever, was less vocal." The resignation that Lord Hussey offered the Queen in this episode is also real. Duke retired as chairman from the BBC in 1996, a contributing factor reportedly that Bert failed to inform him of the contents of the Panorama interview. Frustrated and flipping through countless channels, William puts on songs of praise on the BBC for Liz to watch, and it seems to calm her a little. So, what happened to Martin Bashir afterwards? Well, Bashir went on to win a BAFTA TV award and the Royal Television Society's title of Journalist of the Year, with later career milestones including an interview with pop star Michael Jackson, which is weird. You can also find that all over the internet. Strange. He stepped down from his position as the BBC's religion editor in May 2021, citing ongoing health issues as the reason for his departure. His resignation from the BBC did happen to coincide with the inquiry into the Panorama interview with Diana, though. The BBC has since made an unconditional apology over the way it obtained the interview, with John Burt calling Bashir's deceit one of the biggest crimes in the history of broadcasting. They have also promised never to air the interview ever again. One could argue that Jimmy Savile was one of the biggest crimes in the history of broadcasting, but that's a story for another day, isn't it? Very quick tangent, I promise. When King Charles III had his coronation, I went through and I researched and I wrote down everything that happens in a coronation ceremony, why it happens, the symbology behind it, what all the different robes, orbs, scepters, rods, swords, stones, basically what everything meant, the carriages that were used and why, the crowns that everyone was wearing and why. I went through it in enormous detail and wrote it all out in this book here, as you can see. And then I just, by the time I'd sort of written it all out, it was about a month after the coronation, and I thought no one would really be interested anymore. But if you are interested in finding out, because coronation ceremony hasn't really changed since the 1600s and the restoration of the monarchy after the Civil War. If you are interested in knowing what happens at a coronation and why, and all the different things that Charles chose to use in his, and whose crown people were wearing and why, and whose jewellery and what the symbology meant on everybody's dresses and robes, then you know what makes him officially the King of Scotland and England and all that kind of thing, then drop a comment below and let me know, because I have the notes ready to go. So if the demand is there, I will make the video. Episode 9, Couple 31. The UK divorce court, the decree absolutes are being issued for a couple called the Carters. Liz writes Charles and Diana letters saying everyone is now of the same mind and in agreement that the termination of their marriage is not only inevitable, but preferable. To approve a divorce or request it goes beyond every single one of her convictions, but after 14 years and with their marriage vows in tatters, the well-being of the entire family must be prioritised, and the current situation is intolerable. Liz did write a letter to her daughter-in-law and said, I have consulted with the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Prime Minister, and of course with Charles, and we have decided that the best course for you is divorce. On the 21st of December 1995, a statement was issued by Buckingham Palace saying, after considering the present situation, the Queen wrote to both the Prince and Princess earlier this week and gave them her view, supported by the Duke of Edinburgh, that an early divorce is desirable. The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh will continue to do all they can to help and support the Prince and Princess of Wales, and most particularly their children in this difficult period. Diana is in therapy, saying she felt people were on her side initially, but changed after the interview aired. Valued members of staff had left, such as her private and press secretaries, and Dr. Khan had gone silent on her. And Liz's letter had such an air of finality to it that it made it all feel completely real. Dr. Khan is kind of skated over a bit in this period, when they actually had a rather serious and long relationship. So let's dig into him a little bit more, shall we? Because I think he's been glossed over somewhat. Diana was extremely serious about her relationship with Hasnat, whom she called Mr. Wonderful, and had big plans for their future together. Sarah Bradford writes that she did everything she could to advance his career and hoped that he would find work away from England so that they could marry and live together in peace. Diana was also close to Hasnat's family and visited them in Pakistan, about which he said, she really enjoyed her time when she came here. She also enjoyed the afternoon tea she had with my family, and I think she very much liked the Asian family's eccentric culture. While the pair were clearly in love, he was undecided about the prospect of marriage, and things were kind of on and off. Diana eventually ended their relationship in July of 1997. According to one of Diana's friends, he was a wonderful person and he was in love with her. He was completely besotted with her, but he didn't want to marry her. I think Diana finally realised that Al Fayed could give her all the things Khan could not. He had money and could provide the necessary security. You never see Dodi Al Fayed without 6 or 7 bodyguards. 6 days after their split, Diana flew to Paris and started seeing Dodi Fayed. Diana's friend Lady Annabel Goldsmith said that in her opinion at the time of Diana's death, she was still on the rebound from Hasnat Khan and was trying to make him jealous. Controversial opinion. Lawyers go to see Charles at Highgrove to let him know of Diana's demands. She wants to keep her residence at Kensington Palace, her office in St James's Palace, for her office budget to be separate from her financial settlement, for which she sought a one-off payment of £35 million. Oh, that would have been really nice in my divorce settlement. That would have been, I'd have settled for £5 million. If Charles contests the figure, she'll withdraw her consent to the divorce, meaning 2 years before the marriage could be dissolved. I can't find much information on what Diana initially requested, but I do know she wanted to continue to use the title Princess of Wales and have shared custody of the boys. Camilla has paparazzi camped outside her front gate. Charles suggests that she meet with a press advisor, a spin doctor, to help improve her public image. John Major informs Liz that Charles is being represented by Fiona Shackleton at Farrer & Co. and that Diana is being represented by Anthony Julius at Mishcon de Reya, both firms known for being extremely cutthroat and litigious. Liz asks Major if he'll be a mediator and try to calm things between the Waleses. Camilla goes to meet Mark Bolland, this spin doctor, and says she feels she has 2 options. to abandon Charles and move away and stay out of the limelight, or to go for it and legitimise the affair by marrying him after his divorce comes through. Mark says to do the latter, and that the single best thing that Charles can do to improve his image overnight is to resolve the divorce as quickly as possible, because the country is sick to death of the War of the Waleses. After the meeting, Camilla suggests that Charles should go and see Mark too. Bolland meets with Charles and Camilla and tells Charles he should take the high road, resolve the divorce generously, and make Diana look petty for doing the Panorama interview by being the reasonable party. Mark Bolland was a British public relations executive who served as a deputy private secretary to Charles between 1997 and 2002. He was a key figure in the rehabilitation of Charles's relationship with Camilla following Charles's divorce with Diana and other scandals, including the Camilla-gate call in episode 5. I don't think one can claim Charles ever came back from that, to be honest. He's our king now, and we love our King Charlie, but Tampax Gate will always be a thing. You can't PR your way out of that kind of booty call. Major talks to both Charles and Diana with little success. Richard Toy told History Extra that Major met separately with the Queen, Charles and Diana to discuss the issue before the couple's divorce in 1996. Major's biographer, Anthony Sheldon, later revealed that Diana sent the Prime Minister several appreciative letters. Apart from this, there is very little information regarding Major's role in the divorce proceedings. Major informs Liz that Charles has made Diana an offer of a lump sum of £17 million plus an annual stipend of £400,000 for Diana to fund her own office and travel arrangements. A direct statement from the Waleses and Buckingham Palace will need to be issued and a decree nisi filed for. The final hearing for the decree absolute will be held in a regular court, just the same as everybody else who gets divorced in the UK. In England, divorces require couples to submit an application for divorce, followed by a reflection period, and that sometimes includes counselling, and then a decree nisi comes through, which allows the couple to take the next step in the dissolution of their marriage, and should they not be able to reconcile and the marriage has irretrievably broken down, then the decree absolute is then granted by a family court judge, which finalises by court order the divorce and how any assets, child custody, etc., will be split. The reflection period used to be 2 years of having lived separately and apart. However, in April of last year, it was changed to 6 months as long as both parties were happy to proceed with a no-fault divorce. Both Charles and Diana signed their respective paperwork and their legal team's public statements, with Charles as being dated the 9th of November 1996, even though they actually divorced in the August of that year, so go figure. Liz calls Charles to say the funds to pay for the divorce will be drawn from the privy purse and that it's best for the boys that it's all settled. The details of Charles and Diana's divorce settlement were released in July 1996. While Diana is forced to give up the title of Her Royal Highness, she's able to retain Princess of Wales. She's also able to keep her apartments at Kensington Palace and all the jewellery that she acquired whilst with Charles. She's also given access to jets used by the royal family and can use the state apartments at St James's Palace for entertaining. Buckingham Palace also announces that Diana will get a lump sum payment. The amount was never officially confirmed, but was reported by the New York Times to actually be almost 19 million plus a £500,000 annual stipend for her office. So slightly more. 2 million is a lot more for mere mortals, but slightly more. It's also made clear that the couple will have equal access to their children. Charles then goes to see Diana at Kensington Palace. She jokes that had she known he was coming, she'd have worn her revenge dress. They reflect on the marriage, what could have been done differently, and get along really well during the brief autopsy of their marriage. They apologise to each other for the hurt they've caused one another. However, when talk turns to the Bashir interview, Charles quickly gets annoyed and upset. He said he was forced into marrying Diana by his parents, despite them being well aware that he always loved Camilla. He says now, after 16 years, he finally feels liberated and his life can have the stability and happiness he was denied during their relationship. I cannot find any proof of this conversation having taken place, but it was a fantastic scene, so they can have it. Back to family court, couple number 31, case 5029 of the year 1996. Both parties have lived apart for 2 years prior to petition. The judge grants the divorce and issues the decree absolute. The case is filed, stamped, and sent to the respective parties. As the fictionalised divorce proceedings conclude and wrap up the episode, actual footage of Charles and Diana's royal wedding is shown. The celebration, the hope it represented, the fairy tale wedding was never destined to be happily ever after, and no matter how hard anyone tried, not even a savvy PR machine could spin it otherwise. Episode 10, Decommissioned. Dodie has found the perfect house in LA and calls his father to tell him. He asks Mo to send the private plane so he can bring his new girlfriend to London to meet him. On TV, Diana watches Monarchy, A Nation Decides with Trevor McDonald, who are running a poll as to whether the country wants a monarchy anymore. Diana calls up and votes no repeatedly. This programme did air in January 1997 with a record 2.6 million viewers calling in with votes. 34% of callers said they no longer wanted a hereditary head of state, with 66% saying they wanted the institution to continue. Almost half of the voters thought that in 50 years' time the royals would be replaced with a republic. A third considered them extravagant. More than half said they had less respect for the royal family now versus 10 years ago. And less than half believed Charles would make a good king. At the time, it was the biggest telephone poll ever staged in the UK. I remember Charles being very unpopular when I was a child, particularly after Diana's passing. I believe I was sort of 8 or 9 when Diana died, and I remember there being a lot of unpleasant feeling towards Charles at the time. So I can believe this. Liz's birthday and Charles's thoughtful hand-painted scene is upstaged by Edward's funny singing fish. I remember that bloody fish being everywhere when I was a child. I do not miss that singing fish. At dinner, Charles brings up the programme and its statistics. With the next general election looming and a predicted landslide victory for Tony Blair and the Labour Party, he predicts wholesale changes afoot. Hong Kong are taking back their independence, and Philip says it's undignified to attend a ceremony where a former colony cuts ties. Liz decides that Charles will go in her stead, and Bolland suggests that Charles meet up with Blair in Hong Kong to forge some kind of progressive alliance. Dodie and his girlfriend Kelly take off from LA to London, with Dodie snorting coke and conspiring with Kelly on ways to get Mohammed to pay for things. Dodie was reported at the time to have received a $400,000 a month allowance from his father. I need to have a chat with my father. Something not right there. Their meeting with Mohammed and his wife Heine does not go well. Mo isn't impressed with Kelly at all and wants Dodie to find someone who is their equal in status and who comes from money. He berates his son for making flop after flop of films, all bankrolled by him. The television election is a landslide for Tony Blair with a huge majority. And again, I remember being allowed to stay up late and watch this election, and my mum being elated at Blair's win. It had been 1974 when Labour had last won an election and the Tory party were in shambles with lots of infighting. So my mum, who was always a Labour supporter, was very, very happy that Tony Blair got in. That wasn't to go so great with Iraq and New Labour and everything like that. But that's a story for another day. I remember that election. I remember it coming in live on the TV. Blair wins by 4 million votes, which is insane in the UK. Insane. We are primarily a two-party, two-horse race. Insanity. We are also quite a small country. Blair, standing side by side with his wife Cherie, gives a rousing speech about New Labour for a new millennium. Major laments the loss to Liz, saying, "My party has suffered its worst defeat in memory." Liz says that whatever the historians make of the defeat, Major will always rank very highly in her personal table of prime ministers and that she'll miss his calm, forthright and dependable presence. He says he's very sorry he wasn't able to save Britannia and that the Labour Party seem intent on decommissioning her. When asked what he makes of Blair, Major says it's a triumph of image over substance and that Blair is the youngest Prime Minister in 100-odd years. But he's broken the stranglehold the unions had over the Labour Party and made them electable again, which is no mean feat. Liz says true statesmanship is not confined to a term in public office, and Major is still a young man too. As he's leaving, Blair turns up to meet Liz. Major congratulates him and says it's a funny old business, is politics. One day you're the second most important person in Britain and the next you lose your house, your car and your job in one fell swoop. Major packs up his things at Downing Street and leaves Blair a note that says, "It's a great job, enjoy it." So, what do we know about Liz and John Major's relationship? It's said that the two did share a close relationship due to Major supporting the Queen throughout her annus horribilis in 1992, along with the other scandals she faced throughout the 90s. Another sign of his closeness to the royal family was the appointing of Major as William and Harry's special guardian following the death of Diana. He was also the only ex-Prime Minister invited to Prince Harry's wedding to Meghan in 2018. Of the Queen, Major said, "I found the audiences much more comfortable than I imagined. The meetings always had a touch of formality, but it becomes a very easy relationship, and inevitably, the more one exchanges confidences, the more comfortable it becomes." Major has been the most vocal in condemning the show, The Crown. In a letter to the Daily Telegraph, he wrote that it will be profoundly hurtful to a family who are still grieving for the very person on whose life the entire drama was founded. Netflix may well take the view that any publicity is good publicity, but I assure them it is not, most especially when it disrespects the memory of those no longer alive, or puts words into the mouths of those still living and in no position to defend themselves. Fiction should not be paraded as fact. Entertainment is a great and glorious industry that brings enormous pleasure to many millions. Netflix should not demean it with portrayals that are both injurious and untrue. Damn. Need some aloe for that burn. So, Blair goes in for his first meeting with Liz, where she very quickly brings up Britannia. Blair suggests a new yacht, not paid for by government funds, but by private finance at a cost of £65 million. Whichever company pays for it would own the yacht, lease it back to the government when the royal family required its use, and it should be given the name New Britain, which was Blair's campaign slogan when he was up for election. Liz said she would sooner it be decommissioned, and I think that's a reasonable response. Charles's journey to Hong Kong will be Britannia's last voyage, and then the royal yacht will be retired. Tony Blair did decide to decommission the royal yacht, as the costs were too great to refurbish her, but the announcement that the Britannia would be retired was made in 1994 under John Major's government. Whilst it cannot be confirmed whether the offer of a privately financed yacht was made, there were plans discussed for a replacement, which were eventually abandoned. Of his first formal visit in May 1997 to form a new government at Buckingham Palace, Blair said the Queen reminded him that Winston Churchill was the first Prime Minister she dealt with, and that was before I was born, so I got a sense of my relative seniority, or lack of it. Liz also apparently declined his invitation to call him Tony. What did she call him? Anthony. It's Tony Blair. Tony Blair. She insists on calling him Anthony. That's a power move. Bolland suggests changing the speech written for Charles to deliver to Hong Kong to fit his voice a little bit more. Bolland also apologises that he was unable to get Charles seats in first class. The politicians had already snapped them up, so Charles has to travel in business class. Poor love. And he watches on as Blair chats away in first class, totally unaware of who is sitting directly behind him. Charles's dismay at being seated in business class whilst politicians and other attendants are in first class was true, with his diary entry from the time reading, "It took me some time to realise that this was not first class, although it puzzled me as to why the seats seemed so uncomfortable." He then discovered dignitaries including Edward Heath, the new Foreign Secretary Robin Cook and Paddy Ashdown were all in first class immediately below us. Such is the end of empire, I sighed to myself. I weep for you. Dodie puts down the deposit on the house in Malibu, much to Mo's displeasure. We see Dodie propose to Kelly at the end of the episode, but there's actually mega tea with Kelly that needs to be shared in preparation for next season. Are you ready? Kelly Fisher was an American model who'd featured on the front covers of popular magazines like Elle before meeting Dodie Fayed in Paris in July 1996. Dodie proposed in February 1997 with a £180,000 engagement ring. The two had also bought a £5 million house in Malibu, where they planned to live after their marriage, which was scheduled to take place on August the 9th, 1997. Kelly says Dodie convinced her to give up her career, and he promised her a £2,000 a day allowance to do so. The two were back in Paris on the 14th of July 1997 when Dodie was summoned by his father to join him and Heine, Diana and the princes on a holiday in Saint-Tropez. 2 days before their wedding, Dodie dumped Kelly over the phone. 3 days later, 10th of August, the day after they were supposed to get married, the day Kelly expected to be the first day of her married life, she instead woke up to pictures of Dodie and Diana kissing aboard the yacht in Saint-Tropez that had been released to the tabloids. Kelly had been in Saint-Tropez at the time this picture was taken, staying aboard another of the Fayed's family yachts. Kelly was absolutely beside herself and hired celebrity lawyer Gloria Allred to sue Dodie for a breach of contract, with Kelly claiming that when Dodie broke up with her, he reneged on his promise to provide her with £2,000 a day allowance. In her lawsuit, Fisher claimed that Dodie had offered her $500,000 to quit modelling and move to Paris, but he only gave her $60,000 and bounced a $200,000 cheque, causing her to seek the balance as damages. However, when Dodie and Diana died just a few weeks later, Kelly withdrew the suit. She participated and gave testimony at the 2007 inquest into Diana's death, where a 20-minute recording of a call she had with Dodie immediately after the photos leaked was played. It captures Kelly fuming, "You even flew me down to Saint-Tropez to sit on a boat while you seduced Diana all day and effed me all night." Dodie called her crazy and insisted they had already split up at that point. Where is Kelly now? Since Dodie's death, she has largely stayed out of the spotlight. She currently works as a property developer in South Carolina, where she lives with her husband, pilot Mikhail Movshina, and daughter Grace. She did keep one memento of that time in her life 2 decades ago, though, admitting, "Of course I still have the engagement ring. Girl, I would have sold that a long time ago. Set myself up for life." Diana is alone at the ballet watching Swan Lake. Mohammed signs to her from the box opposite, would she like to go for dinner afterwards? After much coaxing, she agrees to join Mohammed and Heine. Paparazzi follow them on motorcycles, swerving dangerously, a grim foreshadowing of the fate that would soon befall Diana. Over dinner, Diana explains that Camilla is turning 50 and Charles is throwing her a big bash at Highgrove, and she doesn't want to be in the country for that, but she wasn't allowed to take the boys to America for security reasons. Mohammed offers for her to come to Saint-Tropez with them instead and bring the boys. His guards are special forces and will protect them from paparazzi, and there'll be jet skis and shopping to keep them entertained. And Diana promises to think about it. Charles is driven through Hong Kong in the pouring rain. Dressed in a military uniform, he reads a message from Liz. 5 hours from now, the Union flag will be lowered. The flag of China will fly over Hong Kong. And more than a century and a half of British administration will have come to an end. And now the people of Hong Kong can look to a new future. As the old certainties give way, I feel hopeful Hong Kong's unique character and spirit will be a lesson to the world to learn from their example. I wish you all a successful transition and a prosperous and peaceful future. Charles stands in the rain, watching as the flags are swapped over and fireworks lit. Britannia's final foreign voyage was to Hong Kong in July 1997, and it served as a base for Charles once he arrived there. He was visiting to represent the Queen when the territory of Hong Kong was handed back to China on the 30th of June 1997. At 11:30 p.m, Charles read a farewell speech from Elizabeth. Moments before midnight, the flag of the United Kingdom and the British colonial flag of Hong Kong, which was in use from 1959 to 1997, were slowly lowered to the British national anthem, God Save the Queen, symbolising the end of British colonial rule in Hong Kong. A 12-second hiatus occurred before the flag of the People's Republic of China and the new Hong Kong regional flag was simultaneously raised to the Chinese national anthem, March of the Volunteers, to officially mark the beginning of the Chinese rule in Hong Kong. The speech Charles gave was very long. If you want to hear it in its entirety, I'll put a link below. It ended with Charles saying, "I should like, on behalf of Her Majesty the Queen and the entire British people, to express our thanks, admiration, affection and good wishes to all the people of Hong Kong who have been such staunch and special friends over so many generations. We shall not forget you, and we shall watch with the closest interest as you embark on this new era of your remarkable history." Tony Blair boards Britannia to meet Charles and says that now he's seen the vessel up close, he feels terrible about the ship's upcoming decommission. This does have some basis in reality. Royal correspondent Robert Harmon said what the royal family may find particularly intriguing and infuriating 14 years later is that Tony Blair now deeply regrets his part in it. Charles says, what's the point of clinging to the past? They should both look to the future, that the royal family needs an overhaul. Their outdated ideals about divorce and remarriage are painful for him and go against the reality of modern life, where such things have become the norm now. Blair later tells Cherie he sympathises with Charles's position. Blair did board the Britannia in Hong Kong and met Charles, but of the show's depiction of their conversation, a spokesperson for Blair said, "It should come as no surprise that this is complete and utter rubbish." Of the meeting on Britannia, Charles praised Blair, saying he's a most enjoyable person to talk to, perhaps partly due to his being younger than me. He also gives the impression of listening to what one says, which I find astounding. He understands only too well the identity problem that Britain has with the loss of an empire and an inability to know what to do next. Introspection, cynicism and criticism seem to have become the order of the day, and clearly he recognises the need to find ways of overcoming apathy and loss of self-belief by finding a fresh national direction. He wasn't, it seems, so happy about the coming end of Britannia, though, with his diary stating, "If only he could have seen the yacht with the receptions and dinners underway and heard people's reactions. I stood on the deck, gazing at the departing skyline and telling myself that perhaps it is good for the soul to have to say goodbye to that and the dear yacht in the same year." And the Queen Mother's little joke about Hong Kong being a Chinese takeaway was actually lifted from Charles's leaked diaries too, with the corresponding section entitled "The Handover of Hong Kong or the Great Chinese Takeaway." After leaving Hong Kong, the prince visited the Philippines. He described Manila in his leaked diaries also as an awful, smelly, polluted harbour absolutely clogged with filth and rubbish. But he also stated the Philippines were incredibly friendly and warm-hearted and pleased to see the British. Can't win them all, I suppose. This is a man that's used to being in first class, don't you know? Liz approves Diana's request to take the boys to Saint-Tropez. Fellows informs Liz about the meeting between Blair and Charles, and she requests to see Charles as soon as possible. She also asks Fellows to arrange for her to say her own private farewell to Britannia before she's decommissioned. Charles arrives at Buckingham Palace, and Liz tells him she is annoyed that he used the yacht for a holiday with Camilla, and she'd rather he didn't flaunt their affair so publicly. Charles takes offence at the term affair. They are both unmarried, consenting adults, and Diana has thrown grenades over the walls of Buckingham Palace for years, and yet Liz's most bitter condemnation is reserved for Camilla, who has done nothing but keep a low profile and remain dignified. Liz reminds him that the only person in the royal household to have a direct relationship with the Prime Minister is the sovereign, and Charles is not yet sovereign, nor will he be until Liz is dead. The job of monarch is for life. Liz is getting sassy as she gets older, and I'm not sure I can blame her. So Liz takes a final walk around Britannia, looks over old photos and stamps, reliving memories in every room and every area of the ship. The royal yacht HMY Britannia travelled over 1 million nautical miles with Her Majesty and was said to be the only home in which the Queen felt able to truly relax. However, to the Queen's evident distress and Prince Philip's ill-concealed anger, the incoming Labour government of Tony Blair decommissioned the royal yacht, turning her into an Edinburgh tourist attraction, and vetoed a replacement. In December 1997, the royal family and former crew members gathered in Portsmouth for a decommissioning ceremony. The Queen was not the only one seen to shed tears that day, being photographed as she walked off her deck for the last time, shedding a tear at the yacht's fate. And as Diana packs for her trip to Saint-Tropez, Dodie proposes to Kelly. And the series ends with a forlorn Liz standing in her cabin, saying a tearful goodbye to Britannia. Well, so we have a little taste of what's to come in season 6. Obviously, we know the big awful thing is happening in season 6, but we also know a little bit about Dodie and Kelly. And yeah, season 6 is gonna be spicy, so I will get that to you as soon as possible. Yes, so let me know if you would be interested in that coronation video. As I say, I have all the research ready to go. I just by the time I'd finished writing it all, I thought no one would care anymore. So if you would care, let me know and I'll do it, because it'll be relatively easy to do. Do be sure to drop a comment below and let me know what film, TV series, book, musical, whatever you would like this historian to react to next. You can catch me on my socials, which are linked down below. I've also got a PO box if you want to, I don't know, write me a letter. Go for it. Like the video if you liked it, if you dislike it, if you didn't like it, though if you didn't like it, thank you for watching it this far despite not liking it. If you know someone who is really interested in history and likes this kind of level of nitty-gritty deep dive, please consider sharing it. That would be very helpful to me. And finally, 98.9% of you are not subscribed, so if you've made it this far and you've enjoyed what you've watched today, I would really appreciate you hitting that subscribe button. It would mean a lot to me. Thank you. So that is it, and without further ado, I will see you as soon as possible for A Historian Reacts to The Crown Season 6. I am quite looking forward to going and watching this now. It's much more fun when a lot of this stuff is within my living memory, because I can tell you what it was like. I can not only tell you whether things are true or not, but I can also tell you what the kind of climate and the feeling was like in Britain at the time, which is nice as well. So without further ado, take care, be good, be nice, be kind, stay curious, and I will catch you next time on Historian Reacts. Bye, ciao.